Okay, Barry, I think it's time we get rolling
Let's do it.
because we have so much to cover and it's important information. So, welcome everyone. So thrilled to have you. So appreciative of Blue Ridge putting this stuff together, and they have always that passion of helping every analyst get better, helping every analyst deliver, every dollar, really, every dollar of profit to their companies. So we've been doing several sessions. Andrew has been great about putting recordings out there about the previous sessions in the series. And Barry, this one's a unique one. And we titled it, Business Owners Really Creating Your 12-month Game Plan. Barry, what strikes you right away about the title?
Oh my gosh. It's very obvious there. And it is business owners. Ownership is really the key when you start putting together a game plan. And that one, not only because it's in bold, Dan, but because it is ownership. And that's what it's about.
Yeah. And these folks, they walk it every day and they are running a business within their companies. And that's the mindset we want to make sure everybody has. And so we've put together a plan. We've put together a plan that looks back at what we did with the journey a couple of episodes ago, where we basically said, hey, look, wherever you are, as Barry just said, why don't you make an effort to get better every week, every day, and grab some area and decide you're going to get really strong at sub-vendors, at super vendors, at your service strategy and whatnot. So Barry and I came together and said, let's look at this list as if we were you, and let's put together kind of a 1-year plan. We called it our playbook. So Barry, in that playbook, when you and I sat down, the first half of the playbook looks like this. And we're going to suggest that what you do in the coming months, and whether you do one a month, one a week, whatever, we're going to suggest these first two you do first. So start out and establish these like 10 key inventory values and really know your big 3 depletion numbers. And then after that, which components you hit after that, you could adjust the order. That's fine. That's fine. But then we start to get in the meat of the components. So as we go through this, the meat of the first half will be the demand forecasting, service, lead time. And then Barry, what's the second half look like?
Well, in the second half, we always like to finish strong, and we'll continue in component mode as we finish out. And then we're going to land on this period end business review and spend a little bit of time there. And let me tell you, that is so important. We're going to describe what that period end looks like, what a common one looks like, what successful ones look like that we have seen. And then really just describing the overall financial and analytical atmosphere. Any of you guys who were at Blueprint last year, you heard us talk about in all things, think financially. And we want to continue that same theme.
So with that idea, Barry, I think it's a kickoff to our first one. We did a podcast last year and we basically said, hey, every executive ought to know like 10 core inventory values. And we're suggesting that you guys start off and build these key values that you're going to then introduce every month to have a conversation around. Like I would grab a sheet like this or a screen like this and go sit down with my president, my CFO, sit down with the team as we'll talk about during the period end piece. But what are those 10 values? And yours might look a little bit different. That's fine. You might have 12. That's fine. The point is to have them, and we're about to go through them in more detail. But I'll start this way, Barry. The components. We're going to suggest that you know a dollar-weighted, forecast-weighted value for each of these three. What is our overall order cycle? We call it effective. I'll explain that in a minute. What's our overall lead time number right now? What's our safety stock number right now? And every month those could change a bit. And boy, if they do, you need to know about it. So we're going to start out and know these. And by the way, the key there again is dollar-weighted, forecast-weighted, one value for the whole company for each. That starts the component.
Yeah, and you can't leave out demand. It's at the top of the list when you talk about the 7 principles and essential elements of buying. So understanding what your forecast is, what the deviation is, and my favorite, 1 day of inventory, because as you start reducing inventory, or if inventory goes up, you know how to value what 1 day is. And that's important.
So we have a full room, Barry, on this call. I would love to be in front of them and ask everybody, what is 1 day of inventory for your company and for your business? Like you got it just within your analyst setup. And we want everyone to know that number, and we want the entire management team to know this number, and you'll see why soon. So then obviously you always want to know what's our average dollar weighted or even unit weighted service level goal. What did we just attain? And this one might be surprising to many, Barry, but we have learned over the past year, if you know your average buying multiple days, dollar weighted, 9, hey, that's okay. If yours is higher, 13, 14, 15, like many have been, we need to work together and get that down. In fact, if anything, this probably ought to be down lower. We'll explain that. So with those 3, then that leads to these 2, Barry, and what's key about them?
Well, I like to start at the overstock percentage, because understanding your overstock number is one thing, but you have to be able to look at the overstock number in conjunction with the percentage. You make better decisions there. So that's a unique number. And then of course, understanding your dollars and where you are in your inventory position and the order up to level. Understanding, we're going to elaborate on that a bit. Where are we? Are we above it? Are we below it? And we'll talk more about that in the coming slides here.
Absolutely. So by the way, at least half of these numbers are right here. And we want you to visually be able to see this and show it all the time. So Barry, I'm going to launch right in to this next phase. Now that you've established those values, let's look at the big 3, these big 3 depletion values. And here's what I did. Safety stock, lead time, and order cycle. Put the small dollar sign in front. This is a dollar weighted / forecast weighted safety stock. If you have 10,000 SKUs, 200,000 SKUs, it can all come down to one number. And if you want to decimalize it, great, 10.3, 10.5, whatever. But know these numbers, and wouldn't it be great, because many of you, and we know it, we've seen, many of you have on the wall the depletion graph as a big poster or a big canvas. And you gather around it for education and to talk through situations. And to know what your values are is key, especially as you kind of watch them, adjust. So by knowing these numbers, this is your financial investment. And if any of these numbers look a bit large, like by the way, this one is not just the average order cycle of the vendors, it's the effective cycle, taking into account the item economics and taking into account the buying multiples. So this company, as you'll see later, actually has an average 14-day vendor order cycle across everything. But when they buy 20 days supply, because those buying multiples and the economics kick them up that way. And gang, we want to make sure you know these numbers, because some might be surprisingly too big or too small. And then you can be on the attack to bring them down. And why is that line up, Barry, with this line?
Well, let me just pause for a second and help the guys understand here. Day by day, how neat would it be to play pin the tail on the donkey to understand where you are in terms of your order up to level? Are you 2 days above, 2 days below, 5 days above, 5 days below? And see what that looks like over time. Because as components change and you manage components better, then that order up to level is going to change with it. So understanding that you've got days of delay and on-hand days, and of course your 1 day of inventory again. If you take that 1 day of inventory and you compare it to a 1 day reduction in your order up to level, guess what? That's $2 million.
So Barry, you're saying that this pin the tail on the donkey here, this star, as this goes down a day, that's $2 million reduction in the inventory.
Absolutely. And understanding what a 1 day is huge. Yeah. Because 1 day doesn't always equate to numbers, does it? It just says, oh, well, we dropped a day, we dropped 2 days, 3 days, 5 days. Well, what does that really equate to in terms of dollars? So,
by the way, this is not theoretical. There are companies, And there's two of them we've been on the phone with this week. One's a grocer out west, one's a healthcare provider out east. They know exactly what this picture is. They have the big canvas, huge canvas on the wall, and they stare at it and say, their number right here is here, and they need to bring it down. Or their number is 6 days, as Barry said, 6 days above their order up 2. And if they can bring it down 6 days, that's $12 million reduction. So they gather around and strategically think it through, and they watch daily. They know every day where this value is, and they watch every week and month if these values change. So imagine being on top of your business that way. I know you're doing your day-to-day replenishment, but you need that 30,000 foot view to see this big picture also. It's very cool.
Yeah, it helps you directionally. And when we go over this picture right here and these numbers, Dan, it reminds me of the quote that we love from Marcus Lemonis, which is, if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business.
Right. So, gang, these are macro level numbers. If you don't have them, some analytics, some basic math will get them to you, and you'll never look back. Now, Barry, if you had this big canvas on your wall, which many do, what would be right beside it? But of course, the 7 essential steps of buying canvas. Those canvases side by side are key. It shows that a department is focused on ongoing learning. And I know many people have seen this, but let's do this. You and I talked earlier today. Mm-hmm. We basically said, this isn't just these 7, essential elements. It's more than that. So let's hit 5 of them. We talked about a bunch today. One of them is, this is the process, right? This is the replenishment process. The process is as important as the math. Everyone knows this is a process, but I'll just start there. This is the process, of replenishment. That's one. What's another one?
Well, the checklist. It is a checklist when you have an issue at the order level, at the item level, and you're just questioning anything. You're questioning why the order quantity is the way that it is. This is your checklist. You follow from top to bottom, and generally you're going to find the answer in this checklist. Yeah.
They're missing service. Something's going wrong. It's not across everything. It's typically one of these. So great point. Another thing is, if some of you out there have not yet gone to an advanced inventory system, first of all, great to have you here. Second of all, use this as your software analysis checklist. We can't say that strongly enough, because, an ERP system, anything like that, or a weak inventory system, they try to win through just the math, and you can't do it. The math combined with the process and all the steps and making sure none of these things are missing, that's critical.
Yeah, and really to dovetail off of that, you have an improvement plan when you look at these steps. And that's really huge, because when you think about it, when you're managing the system, you have areas that you're good in and your areas that you're not so good in. And this is really an improvement plan that says, well, hey, we are great on lead time forecasting and order cycle analysis and service level, but wow, when it comes to demand forecasting, we are really hurting, especially on profiles.
That's a great point. I love that one. And a final one, this might sound funny, but I'm sure, Barry, you probably remember, you stand up for the first time in front of a strong inventory professional like a Scott Stone, and you say, here's how your life is going to change. You used to come in every day and focus on these components. That's not going to happen. Your system is going to take care of that, and you and I are going to manage them in replenishment, where all of these come together and lead to that. And that's a game changer for anybody who had to replenish one way in the past and then the new strategic way in the future. So a game changer is our number 5. Hey, we're moving on to demand forecasting, obviously. And Barry, we start with the basics, right? And you just said, hey, why not always know some of these values? I'll bet most of these companies, and certainly their execs, don't know what their average forecast is across all items, or even average demand deviation, or some of these others. But Barry, why would it be important then to also track these historically, so that we can see month over month how these values have changed for the past 10 years and the next 10 years?
Well, it's important because you want to understand where you've been. Where have we been not very good and we've gotten much better? Or where were we good once upon a time and we're not so good today?
So every one of these values, by the way, we suggest that you keep track of everyone historically, right? We have seen companies go from a 20% average demand deviation to a 45% over, let's say, 5 or 10 years, not realizing that they just keep adding items. And as you do that and don't take any away, you just tend to have a lot more slower moving, more erratic items, and that gets expensive. So to know that stuff is key, but also, Barry, we'll hit this in forecasting and in service, measuring your performance and not just saying, hey, our goal was 97 and we hit 97.1 or we hit 96.5. Our forecasts were overall within a point and a half. Isn't that great? Well, no, you have to go much deeper. And as many know, we do over 100 different points of showing you where you hit, where you missed. We call these the dirty dozen because these are ones we either want to see closely or we know people fall into problems with. So Barry, let's just have at it and hit some of our favorites. And I'm just going to start and say, first thing I look at honestly is how did they do on their seasonal items or their seasonally forecast items, and how did they do where they either don't have seasonality or haven't recognized it yet? Because as we know, we expect to sell like this, but if the item is seasonal and you don't have the proper seasonal forecast on it, and this is going to happen, it's going to hurt. So they were within a percentage point on seasonal, but over 7 points off on the non-seasonal. There's more work to do here. That's what I read right there. That's mine first one.
I love that one, and I knew you were going to take seasonal.
Yes.
So manual forecast is up there at the top of the list for me. Number one, there are manual forecast changes that need to be made because planners, you guys own the forecast. We firmly believe that today and have believed that historically. So number one, you have to make manual forecast changes based on fact and knowledge, not gut feel and intuition. And how good those changes are can be reflected right here in the dirty dozen. So maybe you're making forecast changes and they're great, but maybe you're making them and they're not so great, which means maybe your compass needs to be adjusted a little bit in terms of how you make those changes.
Yeah, and hey, we were both sitting in the seat owning items. A spike occurred, it became an exception, and we jumped on it. And when we were young at it, we over jumped on it. And we also very do it with new items, right?
Yeah.
We are very optimistic and it doesn't always happen. Or how about this? Somebody else tells you a forecast and you're frustrated because there's no way we're going to sell that much. Well, prove it. Show what's happening on new items. And as we'll show later, you actually will line up the forecast and the service results and you'll see patterns. But we won't go through each one. We just say this, especially during these times, we're seeing demand pattern changes like crazy, and you can't watch it item by item. You need to look at it through different inventory sectors. It could be, slow movers could be doing something more unique than ever before. Yeah. Private label, as well. See where this stuff is happening. And if you say, well, that doesn't tell me how many of my items are new. Well, just know that we always put pictures behind it to show, right now we don't have a large portion of the inventory new, but Barry just said we have a large portion of our inventory with manual forecast. This is in the last 90 days, by the way. That's how we do it. And here's a company that keeps adding. They now have more items profiled than non, and they're doing much better. By the way, these numbers don't look great only because it's the pandemic time. Normally much better, but we want you to live this way, not with one big number, but be able to live and see what's happening in a much deeper way. And again, the 30,000 foot view, huge, huge help. So Barry, here's what we did. We've gone through the first 3 steps, right? We're kind of in the second quarter, Barry. It's not halftime yet. We got some stuff to do. You got to close strong. So service. Barry, I'm going to ask you a question in a second, but the first thing is everybody ought to be able to see their service goals. In other words, what's the mix? Well, we range from 88.5 to 98, or maybe it's 99 or 99.5. And not just how many items are in each mix, but how many dollars. You know, I have a lot of dollars here, but not a lot of items. You want to be able to see that mix. So Barry, why don't I ask you this? If there are 2 or 3 levels of setting service goals, 2 or 3 methods, you know, where you get more progressive each time, define those to us. What are they? What should they be doing?
Well, let me describe this first. You know, you have an initial phase. And the initial phase is before you go to an automated system. That initial phase may be, we don't really know where we are service-wise, and we're not sure where we want to go. So oftentimes that leads to, when you go to a new system, to just set it at a default level. Set it at one number, whatever the general recommendation is for our industry. And then maybe you go with that, and you might adjust that up a point or two just to be careful or cautious. And that's not very good, but that's common, common to, what we've seen out there. Phase 2 is a little bit more elaborate, where you might have an ABC analysis broken down by category, by location.
Yeah.
And that could be based on dollars, units, net margin, picks, and things like that. And of course, guys, depending on what industry you're in, that graph Dan was just showing there, food service is going to be weighted more heavily to the right than, say, a hard goods business is, like HVAC or hardware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Barry, you there?
Yeah.
Okay. So you start there, and then I think it's key that they be able to see their world. And when you and I had analytics hit us for the first time, this might be the first thing we looked at. Hey, visually seeing every item and how they're set. So as you just said, I've got, some at 99.5, 99 and so forth. It should be these faster movers. And by the way, sorry, the x-axis is not there. This is forecast along the bottom, forecast. So this is our fastest moving item. Certainly it's at 99.5. Our second fastest, it's up in the 99s. So the fast movers are up here. The slower movers are down lower. And we always expect, Barry, to see this kind of like a curve like this. But
Right.
what we're really looking for is this guy.
Right.
Or this guy.
Right.
Number 12 ranked items at our lowest setting. Number 2 ranked items is at our 4th lowest setting. And maybe they were just new a year ago and we set them this way, but they haven't been updated since. A visual like this, Barry, they can see the ones that they're not following even the basic ABC, and they can make the quick adjustments.
Right.
So this is really almost a monthly one they had to look at. And then what's your final phase?
Yeah, that's the net margin. That's actually taking it to a completely different level, helping you understand more than just dollars and units or picks. Still generally taking the same approach by location, by category, and understanding the items where you're making more money, which generally we see before we had this picture, we would see a lot of the high net margin items, the 50 plus, for example. I mean, look on this one, you can barely see it, but 90 to 90.5. That's an opportunity to take that one and send it to the right a little bit. Actually, a lot.
Yeah. So look at this one, Barry. So this is the 50% net margin for this company. And it's in brown, and I know it's a little bit hard to see, but look, there's a sliver of them here. There's a sliver of them right there. And they're making so much money that maybe those ought to move to the right. And then look right here. Here's some at 96. This is suggesting, look, take these items and move them higher. You don't want to be out of stock. And even some of these pink ones, there's a lot of pink. Maybe some of these pink, it might be a C item in terms of the forecast, but it's an A item in terms of margin, net margin, and those could move to the right. And now let's talk about the pandemic, because, boy, we were asked earlier today if we've been busy. This has been our busiest time ever, and people are looking for cash. And one of the things we help companies do is go in and say, hey, we'd love to have some of these items up here, but right now we can't. So we actually layer it not by profit margin, but by forecast. So we've been able to do the same thing and find some slower movers that are up high, and maybe there's good margin, that's great, but they need to come down so we can pull some cash and safety stock out of the company. Barry, I think these views have been the most valuable views the past 10 weeks because of just having to reset based on cash flow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that takes us through, and that's the setting side of service. But we just talked about performance. And just like in demand, there are 100 plus ways that we measure service attained by inventory sector, slow moving, new, and then a combination, slow moving new items, slow moving seasonal items, all of those. And we see patterns, and this is again, the dirty dozen. And in this grouping, we're basically saying, hey, we find that you often miss in certain ones. And Barry, I'll hit one. It's unbelievable how often people miss on short lead time suppliers, 7-day or less suppliers. They think, oh, those ought to be fine. But those are the ones they tend to miss on, especially when you take that whole weekend thing into account. They hit 98.2 overall, but missed by 3 points on those. So I'm hitting that one first.
Yeah. And some obvious ones, new, 90.3. That's a tough one. It's always tough to hit new, but I'll take it a step further and look over at the manual forecast again. So manual forecast, we were off on our forecast in the previous picture, and now we're off with service level in this picture. So what that's telling us is that some of the changes that we're making aren't really lining up with what is going on.
And Barry, you've been doing a ton of work on what we call in-period exceptions, where every day of a period, we see period to date exceptions. And these items is what you would catch and be on top of to be able to take this number higher, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I know we've done some really unique stuff there in terms of showing those items that are, that have the incredible demand on them and missing service. But we're also showing items that today, maybe 3 or 4 days into the period, would already be an exception in another 3 weeks from now. Yep. So we're doing some really neat stuff there.
So everyone, here's the point. Go deeper. Go deeper and analyze what's happening. Don't just say, hey, we hit or we missed by a point. You didn't miss by a point across the board. There are certain sectors that are missing a lot more, and you got to go find them and clean up that sector. And of course, there's methods to do that. And just as an example, I mentioned lead time. Here's proof. Here's a company that this portion has lead time of 0 to 7 days. They're missing by 4 points versus the others. Same thing with lead time variance. The low numbers, they're missing here and hitting on the others. Once you see that, you go, oh, wow, I get it. You'll go in and fix it, fix the numbers, and then they're fixed for good. So we got to keep moving along. So here's one in number 5, right around halftime. The silent component, the silent killer is lead time. Very unbelievable. How many companies thought they were missing service because of forecast or other issues? Now that they're measuring lead time and they're seeing seasonality in the lead time, they're seeing seasonality in their suppliers' performance, they're realizing that their service achieved goes as their lead time goes. It is probably the most influential component of hitting and missing, which means you've got to track it and you've got to see it visually, and not just like one chart like this, but really getting it down for all these different things. And Barry, we've seen how many companies have said, I didn't realize that our vacation patterns were messing with our service achieved.
Yeah.
Because now we can see the numbers.
Yeah. I mean, historically, we've always talked about service level, achieving service level. That is, there are things that are in your control, things that are out of your control. The things that are out of your control, like a supplier shipping to you, you may not be able to control that, but you can influence it and manage the lead time. Because goodness, think about when your lead times are 45, 50, 60 days, that becomes the number one component of safety stock. So making sure you're managing lead times staying on top of what's going on has a huge impact to what your future orders are going to be.
And that's right. Plus knowing what, looking at multiple years of history shows, hey, we're okay right now, but next period, we're running into a 17-day lead time. And that's coming off a 15-day lead time period, or month. So with that type of increase, you've got to be ready and you've got to be ahead of it, and some adjustments might be needed. So some of the best analytics the past couple of years have been just in the lead time area. We don't have time to hit all of these, but you can imagine how all of these are important. And here's one, put away patterns. Here's a real life pandemic view. For years, really, and I could go back further, the put away between when it arrived and when it was available for sale was usually less than a day, half a day. Occasionally it would hit a day or a little bit more. Look at this. Do you not think this impacts your service attained? The supplier gets it to you, but it's taking 2.5, 3 days to put it away. Now that was for a few weeks. For this company, it's back down to normal, and it's a good thing. And you could watch your service attain follow this exact same pattern. So here's a question, everyone. Are you doing analytics like this with your lead times, viewing this stuff, and having it influence your replenishment? It's a game changer. Barry, maybe you used the term game changer a little too much. You can call me on that.
Never.
So we're past halftime now, Barry, and we're going to highlight really at a high level a couple of these. We're not going to go through all the economics of order cycles. We do want you to know what your average vendor cycle is, what your average effective cycle is, which is really the one that's driving things. And as we'll see in a minute, what your average buying multiple days is. Now, Barry, you and I have had to work with some companies recently and actually reduce some of the cycles and see if some of the cycles were set too high. And we didn't have to go in and perform, a kind of order cycle, analysis on every vendor, because we just do analytics. We just line up all the vendors, and I just have the front of the tail here. We line up all the vendors and say, from our highest revenue vendor downward, what is the current order cycle setting? And occasionally we would say, okay, 8 days, 7 days, 7 days, 7 days. And then all of a sudden, boom, 16 days, where'd that come in? 12 days, that seems a bit high. Then it would go back to 7. And we could find these quickly and say, why are those set so much higher? And you would find that there was some reason, not always so good, but adjustments could be made very quickly. They could reperform an analysis and get those down, and that's really helpful, isn't it?
Right.
Then from this, Barry, let's talk this one, because we think there's as much opportunity for cash reduction in this as anything, because we've seen it. And we did a session on it, just on this, but let's highlight it again. That buying multiple days. Gang, what is your number? What is your average dollar-weighted buying multiple in days across everything? And then why not look at it by your A items? Oh, Barry, I love this company. This is your customer and you led them to this. It's a grocer. This is a food wholesale company. And look at that. The fastest moving items, 500 and above per period, they only round to 2 days. And think of that depletion graph, Barry. Those expensive items, they buy up to that order up 2 level and not far past it. And that's so critical.
Yeah,
and
that's
then down here, the B items only 5 days. And sure, these items are buying a bunch, but the dollars are here, aren't they?
Yeah, that's a beautiful picture. That is a picture. If anybody on this call wants to take a snapshot of that and have a picture to live to with your multiples, that is it.
Barry, the last time we showed this picture was, a while ago. A company pulled theirs up and it came down to 20 and it stayed at 20 on all the rest of the items. And the average was 18 days, 18. That company made adjustments. Their picture looks like this. They are now today, and we know because we look all the time, they are now today at a 9-day number. Is that unbelievable? Yeah. From 18 days to 9 days, and about a 20% inventory reduction just from that move, which everybody has potentially available to them. So we love this one. And then you just take analytics and you give yourself some information. And like what we did for a company is we said, let's take your high value items that are selling a bunch. And those high value items are at 21 days average buying multiple. There were others lower. We just filtered those out. We said, let's give them a a nice spreadsheet, an online pivot that they can find those items that have a bunch where the current buying multiple is 41 days, but they could, instead of buying to a full, pallet, could they come down and buy to a layer instead, and so forth. And this is all stuff that could be automated. And this company, within a day, made these adjustments by having this pivot.
Right.
Don't have more time to talk on that one, but boy, for some of you, this one right here should not be number 7. It should be right over here at like number 3, perhaps. Now, Barry, we just went through pretty quickly the key component pieces. And I'm going to ask you a question. We've talked period end so much, and we want to make sure people understand that it's critical. So period end is more than just doing your period end exceptions, doing some really good analytics. To be accountable, I've heard you say many times, Barry, you got to throw everybody in the room. So describe that room to me. What would a period end business review look like? What does the room look like? Describe the atmosphere.
Wow. First of all, it has to be one that is of complete energy, excitement, collaboration. And oftentimes we see a U-shaped table, so it makes it a lot easier for conversations to be had. And each planner, you go around and each planner gives a business review. They know their numbers, they know their business, and they talk about their top 3 opportunities, for example, and their top 3 challenges and overall results, how much they're managing, service issues they're having. And some of the ones that are so successful are the ones where they've invited someone else from another area of the organization, whether it's someone from operations or merchandising or even finance, to come in, sometimes listen to what's going on with the group, but also to provide some information. For example, merchandising may invite you may invite them in so that they can tell you more about new product introductions that are coming up. Some of the best will actually invite suppliers to this who can then describe what they're seeing in the market and new product introductions coming up from the suppliers. So it's a very collaborative effort, and you do this one by one going around. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be face-to-face. If you have people who are remote, or certainly like we all are now, you can collaborate very easily. Don't let location be an issue.
Barry, such a good point, because the first one might feel awkward, but once you get rolling, people will come in and they'll come in prepared. And to be prepared, they'll do everything we just talked about, right? We just talked about in demand and in service, analyzing the sectors, turning those data into stories, and those stories will tell you some surprising things that you can bring to that table. And then this might be repetitive, Barry, but you walk in there and you are one of these analysts. Would you just start out maybe with the same thing we showed up front, those top 10 values, except this time, not just, corporate level, but your level? Yeah,
You basically go in and you describe, here's what I'm seeing with my demand. My demand forecast of 164 units is on average is driving $56 million worth of business over in the inventory position area. Average deviation 31%. Understanding 1 day of inventory is 0.35 million. And now I know if I make an adjustment to any multiples, or if my multiples are, if I'm not on top of them like they're at 5 right now, and they start to creep up to 6 or 7, which they might because of operational changes, then I know the impact of any of those changes. So being able to understand these values and then describing them at a corporate level, and then your individual metrics compared to the corporate level, just gives you a good sense of where you are in your overall business.
Gang, what he's saying is so critical. So with a few minutes left, here's what we're going to do. We're going to reinforce the idea that if you know that meeting is coming every month, you're going to be ready for it, especially when a Scott Stone stands up and does a great job describing his business, the steps he's going to take next. You're going to make sure you don't look like you're a step down. You're going to be so well prepared. You're going to describe stuff, and you're going to get better every period. And then from that, we're going to summarize at the end, and I think we've been saying it all along. You want to have a financial atmosphere. And by the way, not only should every report have, a financial tone to it, but why not mimic your income statement by building out an income statement oriented, report. And Barry, we'll just say this, so we don't have too much time to go in. Mm-hmm. The company might be making 3.5 points profit, but now you're able to see through analytics, that's not consistent across everything, and Barry, you and I have seen a lot of companies, maybe the slow movers, you're actually losing money. Maybe the imports, you're making a lot more than you even thought. How is each sector doing? Barry, you've looked at some of these in the past couple of weeks, right?
Right. Where you can see different, bottle sizes in the wine and spirits business versus, on-premise versus off-premise, or in the grocery store business where you're seeing health and beauty and general merchandise go through the roof, but in-service deli and anything in-store bakery has gone down tremendously. So being able to understand the sectors and the categories within the business, and then even within those categories, is really important, because oftentimes you want to make a change at a higher level, but really you should be making the change at a much lower level. And that's where you find those little nuggets of gold.
And boy, I would show this information at my period end meeting to show that I know my business, especially as Barry said, then you invite some other executives in the room. I want to show them surprising stuff and the fact that I know my business. So you create a financial atmosphere. We already are showing, create an analytics atmosphere. Create an analytics atmosphere. It will change what you do. We showed some of these pieces. Sometimes you take analytics and you make them kind of fun and you turn them into some graphics, and it keeps you balanced where you know your macro numbers as well as your micro numbers. Our number 11, no surprise, outbound collaboration. When you're doing all those things we just described, move from defense to offense. It's a great opportunity to say, hey, now we are in the center of the company. And, we only have a couple of minutes, Barry, but when you're here, you can turn all of this information. You can turn all this information, like this information here, how are we doing in different, what does our business look like? How many super steady items do we have? How many erratic? What does that mean to our business? If they're in the center of the company, they can take analytics and push them out in emails and PowerPoints. And I know you push people to do this quite often.
Yeah, absolutely. The challenge always is, and you should think like this. You want to be in the mode of providing information that somebody else does not know. What is it that they don't know that they can utilize? And I have all of this information right at my fingertips to be able to do that. Be proactive, be on offense versus defense.
And our promise, you do this, you will become the center. As Barry said, they'll keep running to you for more info. Before you know it, you're the analytics center of things as well. So we went through these different pieces, and you're saying, where's number 12? Well, number 12 is, once you go through it, you go back to this journey and you say, okay, I think I moved lead time from a C+ to a B+. I can still do some better things there. I moved an area from a B to an A. Give yourself a grade in each area, and then what do you need to refine next? Put the next 6 to 12 months game plan together. I guarantee you, you will never have an A+ on every one, because our profession is too vast. And there's too much great information now that's telling you where help is needed, which we love, by the way. So this is why we chose this amazingly exciting profession. And the plan you put together doesn't have to follow those exact 12 steps in that order. Go in whatever order, but don't ever just leave, well enough alone. So with that, we wanted to turn it to you guys and see if there are questions. And Andrea, if you want to chime in and see if questions are coming in through the chat, I'll try to take a look here and see if there are any.
Yeah, we had a few come in. Thank you guys for those questions. And if you have more, please hit us with them right now.
Barry, go ahead and hit some if you've seen them. I'm looking for my chat window, sorry.
Yeah, so our good friend Scott Stone asked us about when we were going over the lead time information, if that was at the supplier ship point level. And yes, that is at the supplier and ship point level where you see that information, Scott.
Yeah, good question. Anyone that has others, go ahead and type something in there. We would love it.
And Maria, thank you for that question. She asked if, do we use supply chain analytics, her tool that she uses to find most of this information? And yes, Maria, you do.
Oh, you love Maria's questions?
Yes. I was going to be disappointed, Maria, if you did not have a question.
She's always on great behavior because she knows we have a video of her dancing at the last blueprint. She doesn't want published. We're thrilled to have so many of you on that maybe haven't been on as much, but plus it's so encouraging to see, you know, multi-year, multi-decade veterans keep coming back to learn and learn. And gang, just know, hopefully what you're seeing is the steps we're suggesting, they really show this profession is you have a complex portfolio of inventory you're managing. It's an incredible job, and you want to manage it like a business owner, and this stuff will help you do it. All right, any others, please type away. We know we hit a lot of info there. Andrea is recording this, so if anyone couldn't make it and you want to get it to them, she'll have that available probably within a day or so. And she has the previous ones available as well. And as you share any future questions, shoot them and we'll be glad to answer them. Barry, any final thoughts?
Well, we don't see any additional questions. Once again, guys, we really appreciate you tuning in with us. We love doing these, and we just can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to hang out with us. And again, we appreciate you tuning in with us.
Thanks, everyone. You've chosen a great profession. Thanks, Andrea, so much.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.